NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a group whose name makes headlines every day. War violence have dominated the headlines for the past few years, including the Israel-Palestine conflict and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. With such turbulence, it's unsurprising that the international organization has gained 2 new member countries in as many years. Which countries will join next? How will NATO's military and diplomatic power evolve? And to answer those questions, we need to look to the past. World War II created devastation like nothing before. Tens of millions of people died, both soldiers and civilians. In the final days of the war, when it became clear that the Allied powers would win, the leaders of Great Britain, the USSR, and the USA met several times in Potsdam, Germany, to discuss what would happen after the war. During these meetings, the 3 nations shaped the rest of the 20th century. Among other decisions, Germany was divided into East and West Germany, and Poland's borders were redefined. During a meeting in July 1945, US President Harry Truman pulled USSR Secretary of State Joseph Stalin aside to give him a piece of information that would paint the future in blood. On the back of a photograph taken that day, Truman wrote, "In which I tell Stalin, we expect to drop the most powerful explosive ever made on the Japanese." He smiled and said he appreciated my telling him, but he did not know what I was talking about, the atomic bomb. Soon, though, the entire world knew what he meant. On August the 6th, the US dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. When Japan still refused to surrender, the US dropped another nuclear bomb, this time on the city of Nagasaki. 27,000 people were killed instantly, but radiation put that initial number to shame, claiming another 43,000 lives by the end of the year. Casualty reports on both attacks vary from source to source, partly because early studies may have omitted certain groups when estimating the pre-bombing population numbers. Between 70 and 140,000 people were killed in Hiroshima, and between 40 and 70,000 in Nagasaki. On August the 14th, the Japanese government agreed to surrender unconditionally, and on September the 2nd, Japanese representatives signed the official surrender on board the USS Missouri. The bloodiest war in history was finally at an end, and the old world was almost alien to the one that emerged. Just before we continue with today's episode, I got something special to share with you, and that is today's fantastic sponsor, Holzkern. Holzkern don't just make watches and jewelry, they make pieces of art. I'll tell you why it's so special. Basically, they've got a jaw-dropping selection of jewelry and fashion pieces and watches for both men and women. There's over 1,000 options, so you are bound to find something you like what I found for myself, which is this skeleton watch. It's an automatic watch, so you just wear it on your wrist and it charges itself up, so you don't need to replace the battery, which is extremely cool. Also, the strap here is made out of wood, and that's what's so special about Holzkern. Basically, all of their pieces are unique because they are made with pieces of nature, like wood. That's right, and the good thing is all of this wood is FSC certified, so you know when you're buying, you've got a clear conscience, you're not chopping down the Brazilian rainforest or anything. It's ethically sourced wood, which is fantastic. Plus, Holzkern's not just some internet brand, they've got over 10 stores in Austria and Germany. I should go visit one of those, I'm pretty close to those countries. And now you're probably wondering, well, Simon, that's great. I don't live near Austria and Germany though. How do I get myself a fantastic piece of Holzkern jewelry or a watch? Well, all you have to do is go to Holzkern, HOLZKERN.com/Warographics, link below, or scan the QR code on the screen now, because that's easy, isn't it? And don't forget, you can use my special discount code WARO, WARO, for a fantastic 15% off. Thank you to Holzkern for sponsoring, and now back to today's episode. One of the biggest changes was the division of Germany into East and West. Post-war Germany was in a desperate situation. Hunger was widespread. Roughly a quarter of houses were uninhabitable, and the economic and political systems had collapsed. The USSR, UK, France, and the US split Germany into 4 zones, a decision originally made at the Yalta Conference in February 1945. They each absorbed fragments of a country that was battered and broken. The Soviet Union took control of the eastern part of the country, while the West was divided between France, Britain, and the US. The capital city of Berlin was divided evenly between the German Democratic Republic in the east and the Federal Republic of Germany in the west, despite being located in the east of the country. The fact that it was geographically located in the east would cause problems for decades. For the first time in years, though, there was relative peace. But that peace didn't last long. In 1946, George Kennan, the US ambassador to Russia, sent his infamous long telegram to the Secretary of State in which he warned that there could be no lasting peace between the US and the USSR. The telegram set the stage for the American policy of containment, which first came into effect in 1947. During this time, Greece was embroiled in a civil war between the government and the Greek Communist Party, and there was fear that a communist victory could spread to nearby Turkey, which was also facing political instability. Some communist countries were involved on the side of the Greek Communist Party, although the extent of their involvement is unclear. The British government announced that they were withdrawing aid from both countries. In response, American President Harry S. Truman made a speech to Congress on March 12, 1947, proposing that they send aid to the Greek government to contain the spread of communism. This speech became known as the Truman Doctrine, and with that, the Cold War began. In 1948, Czechoslovakia fell to communism, the latest in a series that stretched back to 1945. In the United States, Red Scare gripped the public. The House Un-American Activities Committee had already been conducting investigations into suspected communist activities for a decade. That same year, the USSR blocked access to Berlin from West Germany in an attempt to force the countries governing West Germany out of the capital. When the USSR tested its first nuclear weapon in 1949, the need for a unified defense between North America and the rest of Europe became crystal clear. That same year, on April 4th, representatives from 12 countries gathered in Washington, D.C. to sign a treaty in which they pledged to do two things. First, that they would pursue diplomatic resolutions wherever possible, and second, that if diplomacy should fail, an attack against one of them would be an attack against all. On that day, 75 years ago, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was born. The original members of NATO were the United States of America, Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, Italy, Belgium, France, Iceland, Norway, Luxembourg, Denmark, and Portugal. As of the 11th of March 2024, NATO has 32 member states. So how did the organization almost triple in size in just 3/4 of a century? All prospective NATO members must be voted in unanimously. This may be part of the reason why NATO didn't grow until 1952, when Greece and Turkey joined. The Greek Civil War had ended in 1949, with the defeat of the communist forces, leaving over 50,000 dead and more than 10 times that number displaced. West Germany followed in 1955, furthering the rift between the USSR and its former allies. Spain joined in 1982. However, the most globe-shaking changes were yet to come. In response to West Germany's acceptance into NATO, on May 14, 1955, 8 communist countries signed the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, known as the Warsaw Pact. This treaty was ostensibly dedicated to promoting and developing friendship, cooperation, and mutual assistance in accordance with the principles of respect for independence and sovereignty of states and of non-interference in their internal affairs. The 8 nations that signed the treaty were Poland, Bulgaria, Albania, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and perhaps most significantly, East Germany and the USSR. Despite its promises, this agreement allowed Moscow to tighten its grip on the other nations. Unlike NATO, the Warsaw Pact didn't last. One of the biggest signs of its impending collapse was the fall of the Berlin Wall. Beginning in 1949, East Germany faced a huge emigration crisis as refugees fled the poverty and civil unrest which racked the country. National Geographic reported that at points over 1,500 people crossed the border daily. In response, East Germany began construction of a hard border between East and West Berlin in 1961. The wall eventually reached 27 miles in length. However, the wall's existence aggravated anti-communist sentiment in East Germany, as people could literally look out of their windows and see people with whom they shared a culture living in relative prosperity. The pot began to boil over, but it would take almost 2 decades for the perfect storm to hit. In 1989, following a series of travel reforms across the USSR that backfired spectacularly, thousands of East Germans fled to Western countries. On November 9, 1989, Günter Schabowski, a member of the ruling Socialist Party, stated that East Germans were free to travel to West Germany. Though this was the day that East Germany opened its borders, the wall itself was gradually dismantled over the following months. In 1990, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev allowed German reunification in exchange for aid to the Soviet Union. This meant that the former German Democratic Republic was now a part of NATO. Germany's reunification signaled the end of the Warsaw Pact, which had already been destabilized by a series of revolutions in 1989. In July 1991, when the Soviet Union was on its last legs, the remaining members dissolved the pact. As a result of all of these factors, the Soviet Union was officially dissolved on December 24, 1991, marking the end of the Cold War. As US Secretary of State Madeleine K. Albright put it, the print of Stalin's bloody boot could still be seen stamped across the former Warsaw Pact nations. The future security of Czechia, formerly part of Czechoslovakia, was uncertain, according to a 2024 article written by President Petr Pavel. In the article, the Czech president cited this as the main reason why, in 1999, the Czech Republic joined NATO. Later that same year, Poland and Hungary also received NATO membership. This put further strain on NATO-Russian relations, which had already deteriorated recently due to the Kosovo War. NATO had foreseen this and signed the Founding Act with Russia in 1997, in which they, among other agreements, outlined their mutual respect for independent nations and intention to resolve problems diplomatically. However, Polish historian Sławomir Dębski wrote in 2020 in a tweet thread that the treaty is not legally binding. NATO didn't accept any new members until 2004, when 7 nations received membership. Romania, Bulgaria, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Slovenia, and Slovakia. They all joined on March the 29th, 2004, marking the largest increase ever. And this brings us to the landmark 2008 NATO summit in Bucharest, whose shadow still hangs over us. For the first time ever, Russia sent a representative in the form of President Vladimir Putin. One of the main topics up for discussion was whether and when Ukraine and Georgia should be granted membership. The topic created friction between members, with the United States arguing for accession for both nations and France and Germany taking a negative stance, citing fear of antagonizing Russia. The summit ended with a vague agreement to eventually allow both to join NATO, but with no clear timeline. Putin warned that any attempt to expand NATO to Russian borders would be seen as a threat. Staying true to his word, Russian forces attacked Georgia on August 8, 2008. Though the conflict only lasted a few short weeks, at least 850 people were killed and over 1,000 were displaced. Almost 14 years later, history would repeat itself when Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia's invasion of Ukraine caused Sweden and Finland to apply for NATO membership on May 8, 2022, ending years of neutrality. Russia and Finland have a complicated and bloody history. In 1939, Russia invaded Finland, starting a conflict called the Winter War, which only ended when Finland ceded 11% of its territory. Hungary and Turkey blocked both of these new applications. Turkey accused Sweden of harboring Turkish terrorists and took issue with the Swedish and Finnish bans on trading weapons with Turkey. In 2022, the 3 nations signed a memorandum addressing Turkey's concerns. Meanwhile, Hungary has taken issue with Sweden's criticism of its prime minister. Finland was granted membership on April 4, 2023. However, Turkey and Hungary did not ratify Sweden's membership application until this year, 2024. As a result, Sweden did not become a member of NATO until March the 7th of this year. As of now, NATO has 32 member nations. Sweden and Finland are the most recent members, but what does the future hold for the transatlantic organization? The short answer to that question is, we just don't know. In 2022, Ukraine formally applied for NATO membership amid its ongoing defensive war against Russia. At the 2023 summit in Vilnius, NATO reiterated its support for Ukraine's accession, but once again did not provide a concrete deadline. However, NATO and Ukraine have helped to solidify their current relationship by setting up the NATO-Ukraine Council to coordinate the distribution of military and humanitarian aid. Still, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has stated that Ukraine's accession must wait until after its war with Russia, as NATO could be drawn into the war under Article 5 of the treaty if Ukraine is allowed to join before then. Bosnia and Herzegovina joined NATO's membership action plan in 2010, which is one of the earliest steps towards accession. The country has a complicated history with NATO, though. In 1994, during the Bosnian War, NATO used force for the first time when they shot down Bosnian Serb aircraft. This was soon followed by repeated airstrikes on Bosnian Serb targets. In part, as a result of NATO's involvement, the war ended with the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement in December 1995. However, that peace agreement may be in danger since the power of Bosnia's constitutional court was limited in the Republika Srpska. Bosnia and Herzegovina is divided into 2 semi-autonomous political regions: the Republika Srpska, which has strong pro-Russian tendencies, and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. According to a report from the Klingendal Institute, Russia has been successful in spreading disinformation throughout the region, although those efforts don't seem to have hampered the nation's cooperation with NATO yet. What impact this disinformation will have in the future is unclear. So where does that leave us? Well, as of right now, the future of NATO is somewhat uncertain. Though the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has seen substantial growth since its formation, the fear of inciting a response from Russia could prevent other European nations from joining. However, there are very few other organizations like it in the North Atlantic area, so some countries may have little choice. We simply have to wait and see.